Hi there, Aleksey Krylov is here. Today is October 19th, 2023, and I wanted to put this short video together to outline some of the materials that startup founders and executives may want to put together in preparation for a fundraising campaign. Um, I'm basing this experience on many years of working in the fundraising industry and working literally with hundreds and hundreds of startups. In the last 7 years, I served as the CFO for um, a number of life sciences companies for which I helped raise capital. And previously, I served as an investor with several family offices, so intimately involved in various fundraising exercises and understand what normally investors come to expect from this type of communications with startup founders. And as we are looking at the fundraising campaign, of course, there are several key elements that I found startup founders and executives need to put together in order to come into this exercise fully prepared. And as you can appreciate, preparing for this campaign is one of the stepping stones to actually successfully getting into and through the goal line. The fundraising campaign, I can comment, is a fairly standard procedure that tends to follow certain sequential steps. And even though there is a certain sequence to the steps, there is a lot of room for improvisation and improvement as you sort of go through this exercise. You need to improvise, you need to be flexible and respond to investors' questions or certain expectations as they come up. And one last thing I wanted to mention about the fundraise: it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And preparing for this as if it is a marathon is an important mindset that founders, executives need to carry with them when they launch the fundraising campaign. And in properly preparing for this fundraising exercise, founders help refine their understanding and their view of the business model of the company that they're trying to build. That helps them refine the plans on how to actually take the company forward and grow it more effectively. It enables them to pace themselves, both from the investor communication perspective, but also through the most effective timing of when they need to put in place and execute on certain strategies around the company's growth. Last but not least, this is the fundraising is a two-way communication with investors where many of the investors are asking very, very smart questions. Sometimes those questions that founders have not even thought through. And this process enables founders to problem solve and come to identify the best solutions for the companies and enable perhaps the companies to grow most effectively. So it's a creative process. It's iterative. It's a long one too, and preparing for this process is very valuable exercise for the founders as well as the executives of the startup. And then when it comes down to financial preparedness, I encourage my clients with whom I do consulting work as a fractional CFO, virtual CFO, to focus on the 7 key elements. There's the documents, but there are also deliverables and the communication vehicles that founders may effectively use to deliver the message around their companies. The first one is the teaser. Then we talk about the non-confidential deck. We talk a little bit about the confidential deck, some financial projections. We talk a little bit about the VDR, and last but not least, we'll wrap up this presentation with discussion of the cap table. So the teaser, as the name implies, it's a short one-page communication that is envisioned to communicate very concise information about the company. It's designed to pique the investor interest and want them to come back for more. Of course, you want to spend a little bit of time designing the catchy headline where investors get hooked. You want to give enough description of the business that investors would like to learn more. You want to identify and communicate a clear call to action. What is it that you want investors to do? You want them to set up the meeting. You want them to request non-confidential deck. So some of these things, they need to be thought through, and what will follow is obviously a means for the investors to get in touch with a founder in order to set up what the next step in this investor company dialogue is going to be. As we progress through the list, the next communication vehicle from the company to investor is non-confidential deck. Again, it should be a informative document. It should provide an overview of the business. It should adequately describe the marketplace. It should provide explanation of what the product or service is all about, address the competitive landscape. It also should clearly communicate how the company is going to go to market and start recruiting customers. Some financial information absolutely should be communicated. And last two elements, sometimes very frequently overlooked by the founders. I find it's very refreshing when founders clearly ask what they need from investors. They ask for specific dollar amounts and they communicate clearly how they're going to spend the dollars. And it's a welcome message from investors. Investors don't like wasting their time, and when they clearly understand what founders want, all they have to do is to say yes or no. Very too often, I find some founders don't communicate specifically what they're actually asking from investors. And as the conversations progress with investors, many investors would be interested in signing confidentiality agreement. And once that happens, deeper discussions start taking place. Some market research may involve sensitive information and therefore can only be released to the investors under the confidentiality agreement. Certain growth strategy may contain competitive edge that founders may not necessarily want to disclose to the general public because this will compromise their competitive edge, and therefore CDA needs to be in place before those can be shared. Some customer data, also important and highly sensitive, both from the continuous relationship with customers, but also the importance of the potential growth that some of these customers may deliver to the company. If there is a specific, for example, if the large partnership arrangement is going down the pipe, the documents haven't been signed, communicating to prospective investor specific customer names without confidentiality would be way too premature and potentially could compromise the deal with the customer. So some discretion and details on the customer should be exercised very diligently. Certain elements of the product and technology description should not generally be available to the general public because, again, competitive position for the founders is important. Certain elements around intellectual property, like trade secrets, should always be kept close to the vest. Detailed financials should also not necessarily be widely advertised and only be disclosed to investors when requested after the CDA has been put in place. Last but not least, specific exit strategies, especially around M&A transactions, can only be shared with prospective investors if there is an NDA in place. As we move along and investors continue to express interest in the company, they may want to jump in very detailed due diligence. And this is where the data room, VDR, virtual data room, becomes an important vehicle of communicating information about the company. Very often, founders sense that investors may be willing to submit a term sheet, and therefore it's reasonable to let investors in to review detailed confidential information about the company. And of course, VDR is all about due diligence. It communicates a lot of sensitive, confidential information, and it does so with a high degree of efficiency. Virtual data rooms, this day and age, provide a lot of control and monitoring of what specific details investors spend time reviewing. So this can be an interesting and very informative tool for the founders and executives to understand where investors are spending most of their time. There are certain legal and compliance requirements that VDRs can help communicate. Specifically, certain disclosure information may need to be delivered before investors execute the documents and wire the funds. And at least VDR enables the companies to deliver this information and store the audit trail of the fact that investors indeed reviewed this information and therefore the full legal and compliance requirements were met. VDRs provide a safe, secure way of communication with investors, especially if there are updates. The company can use virtual data rooms to push this communication out to the investor community, and again, provide the insight and secure insight which specific investors reviewed which details. Last but not least, as some of this investor fundraising campaign goes into the months, sometimes quarters, certain documents get dated and financials get stale and therefore needs to be updated. And VDR provide a lot of flexibilities with respect to how to provide proper version control around various documents. Another documents that's very often reviewed by investors with significant amount of detail and time spent is the financial projections. And normally one comes to expect that each financial model should contain projected income statements, balance sheet, and cash flow. And I'm actually not a huge fan of this formalized presentation of the projected financials. I like to show investors high-level shortcut metrics that communicate to them the growth pace and show them the trajectory of the company, show them the traction with the customers, show them the high-level overview of what the cost structure of the business is. And of course, the balance sheet is important, but not all details on the balance sheet are necessarily relevant to investors. They want to see high level of risk. If there are such concentration on the balance sheet, for example, which we're in debt, this is relevant for investors. Other stuff may not be so relevant, especially for the purposes of the decision making. Again, early in conversation, especially if the financials are non-confidential, one want to communicate in shortcuts such as annualized annual rate of revenue, number of customers, or another meaningful and effective way of communicate specific financial information is through charts. That being said, once the investors are fully engaged, term sheets are being negotiated, detailed financial information must be part of the diligence exercise. And this is where it can be a double-edged sword for the founders. Think of financial projections as another tool of communicating the story about the company. And smart, thoughtful founders will use rational, very paced, very detailed assumptions to communicate what they want to convey about the growth prospects of the company. At the same time, I've seen one time too many how founders go very aggressive with their projections and damage their credibility. So it's a communication tool, and one should be using the financial projections with certain care. And this is where financial consultants with experience in raising capital and communicating with investors can be a significant, can bring significant value to the founders, both from the execution, building the Excel spreadsheet, but also providing that balancing resource or balancing thought that would, again, enable founders to effectively communicate the company's story to investors, and at the same time preserve the credibility that's going to matter to getting the deal done. Last but not least, the cap table. This is another document that I advise companies to prepare in advance of any fundraising campaign, because it needs to be available on the short notice, but also it's a tool that can become very, very useful in helping negotiate the terms once the terms are under negotiation. Very often we get involved, I get involved with the company's founders in helping them build cap tables and run various pro forma cap table scenarios where certain terms are being modeled out to get the full dilution impact of the specific terms on the page. But cap table also communicate the overall ownership of the structure. They communicate certain governance elements that investors need to be aware of, as well as the founders, co-founders need to be aware of. And of course, this is where consultants from Tialma can be very helpful to some of the founders. The last thought that I wanted to leave with you today is financial consultants like the CFO, whether it is the full-time CFO, fractional, virtual CFO, however you want to think of that person, is the founder's partner. At Tialma, we pride ourselves to being thought leaders on how to help founders raise capital. We've done this on many occasions, and happy to bring some of this resources to the table and help customers execute on their fundraising goals. Please check us out at tialma.com for additional information on our services and capabilities. Please like this video, share if you find this helpful, and please come back to view some additional information. Some additional videos will be posted shortly. Have a great night. Cheers.